Community. Just to share with you what Beautiful Minds is all about, we did a version of this program about a year and a half ago at this mosque, and I'm very grateful people still remember what we did. And let me share with you where we are now with this program. Between our last visit and today, we have done this program in around 50 to 60 masajid all over America. And as I shared with you, the idea of this program was very simple. There are two questions which we are asking ourselves. Number one, what has happened to the Ummah and what we can do to help it become better. So why this program? The only sustainable difference for an organization or a country or an Ummah is basically its people. Normally people look at how rich some people are, how rich some families are, how rich some countries are. But if you actually look at it, the biggest difference is not anything else but the people. And whenever an ummah does well, a mosque does well, a family does well, a school does well, the people are good. And when there are problems, then always remember that they're the people who are having problems. So the best remedy for improving things in any family, any mosque, any community, any ummah, is to invest in the people. So with this in mind, we developed this program. It has 7 modules. The first one we are going to do today, which is building beautiful minds. The second one is about personal excellence. The third one is developing proactive minds. The fourth one is developing personal vision and goals. The fifth is developing personal belief system and values. The sixth is teamwork skills. And the seventh is leadership. Okay, the purpose of this program is to share with you the importance and urgency of building beautiful minds in our homes, mosques, schools, colleges, universities, and workplaces. So if you look at any human being, the biggest thing which we start with is physical independence. A child wants to walk, and then they want to go and do things on their own. And I think the real independence in our life starts when we are economically independent, which means we start making our own money, our own salaries, our own things. And this is only possible when we have a free mind, a mind that can think, that can create, that can make a living for itself. So if you look at the problems of the Ummah, we all want to be physically free, we want to do things which we want, but economically, most of the Muslim countries where there's no oil or no natural resources, you will find that we are economically deprived. And the primary reason is because, very simple, that the people are not mentally free. They don't have the academic rigor to live their own lives and to create their own lives. So towards this end, we said, what can we do? One of the things we realized was something very simple, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every one of us tremendous resources to succeed. But the issue is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only gives the resources, but then He says, what do we do with them? And actually He's looking for the results that we produce. So both in deen and dunya and zindagi and akhira, He looks for the results and He'll reward us accordingly or punish us accordingly. In order to convert our resources into results, He has given each and every one of us the ability to think. We call this the mind. As far as the mind is concerned, if you look at it, and this is even mentioned in the Quran, some people use their minds with hikmah. And we call these people gardeners gardeners. And then these people, they are very unique. What they do is they use minimum resources to produce tremendous results. So these people are actually the creators of wealth, happiness, peace, abundance in any society. On the other hand, there are people who use their minds without wisdom. We call them parasites or woodcutters. They actually use the tremendous resources of the community to produce negative results. So if you look at this picture, one of the things that it's very clear that whenever a family goes down, whenever a community goes down, whenever a nation or a ummah goes down, basically the parasites and woodcutters, they are ruling, and the gardeners have been disempowered. And whenever we do well in life, it's very simple that the gardeners are ruling, the majority of the people are gardeners, and the woodcutters and parasites have been disempowered. So the first thing we understood is that if we want to improve the fate of the Ummah, we have to help the gardeners become more empowered. Towards this end, we wanted to understand the difference. The difference between a gardener and parasite is primarily the way they think. So in any situation, whether a gardener is sitting with his parents, with his friends, with his family, with his community, in the mosque, thinking about his nation, the world, or the Ummah, he's always, or he or she is always thinking about what can I give back. This is the biggest trait of a gardener. While a woodcutter, on the other hand, in any situation is always thinking about what can I take away from others. Now, how do they give? Basically, the intention is very powerful. The intention of the gardener is benevolence, kindness, generosity. And they have tremendous commitment and responsibility to give the most valuable things they have. While a woodcutter, on the other hand, has the intention of malevolence, bad intention, and the intention is totally bad. And with tremendous commitment and responsibility, the gardener has commitment and responsibility for the community, while a woodcutter has total absolute commitment and responsibility for his own self. So, and that's why they become more and more selfish with time. When you take this theory forward, you find that this giving versus taking business, when a child is born, at the time of birth, he or she is an unconditional taker. They want somebody to clean them, somebody to feed them. They cannot give anything in return. And throughout the life, this child will collect. One of the things you can ask your parents is that the day you were born, you never came with anything. For example, I didn't come with these clothes that I'm wearing, or the shoes and the socks, or the car, or the laptop. Actually, I came just a small body of a child. And throughout life, I collect things. I collected my educational degree, I made a house, I have a car, I have clothes, I have things, I have books. But the sad truth is that the day we die, everything will be taken away from us unconditionally. We will be wrapped in 2 pieces of cloth and buried, and everything will be left behind. So in between, for those of us who live and who think like woodcutters or parasites, we have a very simple logic. We try and take more, give less, and we accumulate wealth and success. On the other hand, those of us who live our lives as gardeners, we have a different logic. We share and give everything to others unconditionally. This is basically the paradigm difference between a gardener and a parasite. So, what does this woodcutter take from others? Basically, he or she lives their lives according to what they need. There are 3 primary needs of a woodcutter. The most powerful need is the need for money. And because of this, whether they are at the lowest level or the highest level, they will do things to make money, whether they deserve it or not. By hook or crook, they will just take money. The second primary need is hubbeja, which is the love to be respected by others. And towards this end, they would force you to salute them, force you to tell them that you care for them, force you to invite them, or whatever. They will force you to respect them in many ways. And the third thing is love for power. And actually they need power because of the 2 primary things, for money and respect, and thirdly because it gives them power over other people. The gardener lives his or her life according to his or her values. They also need money, but they learn to create wealth and money by relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making sure it is halal and tayyib, making sure it has khair and barakah. So the values of halal and tayyib and khair and barakah, it governs their need for making money. So actually, if you look at their dua, they will say, "Oh Allah, give me only that rizq which has khair and barakah in it and which is halal and tayyib." They also need respect. And in order to earn the respect, they will respect others. I mean, even if it's a small child, they will hug him, kiss him, do their salams. Even if it's an old person who's totally useless, they will give the salams and respect them. And because of the respect they give, they are respected. Thirdly, they also need power. And the way they create their power is over the garden or the world that they create. They have power because they create wealth. They have power because they love people, and because of that love, people love them. So their power is very unique and different from the power which a parasite or a woodcutter wants. So a gardener, when he or she gives the most valuable things with the intention of khair in it, with total commitment and responsibility throughout their lives, they basically build and create things. While a woodcutter, when they take with the intention of malevolence, with total commitment and responsibility to their person, which is selfishness, wherever they go, they basically demolish and destroy not only people, but institutions and resources. So once we had this picture clear in our mind, we said, what can we do? So one of the things as a teacher, I understood clearly that we have failed to nurture our children as gardeners. And that is why what you see in the ummah and in our families is a predominance of parasites who want to use the resources and destroy whatever we have. So our goal was very simple. We wanted to work with about 60 million people who could think as gardeners, so that every nation in Islam, in every household, in every institution, in every mosque, in every school, college, university, we have gardeners who are thinking about giving, who are thinking about creating, who are thinking about caring with commitment and responsibility. So towards this end, we needed a role model. Especially when I come and teach in America, we need a role model whom everybody could look up to. And we found that in the person of Prophet ﷺ. And we have not sent you Muhammad ﷺ, but it's a mercy for all the worlds. But at the same time, since we live in an age of reason, we wanted something from science. And here we met Mr. Pascal, who is a scientist. And this is a quote from the net. He says that nature imitates herself. A grain thrown in a good ground brings forth fruit. Similarly, a principle thrown in a good mind brings forth fruit. Everything is conducted by the same master. And if you notice, master is with a capital M. He's referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The roots, the branches and the fruit, the principles and the consequences. So whether you are a farmer or you are working with people, it's the same. What you plant, you shall reap. And in this case, unless we plant beautiful principles in a beautiful mind, we cannot hope to achieve beautiful fruit for the ummah. So towards this end, we said, what can we do? The first thing we wanted to do was to define a beautiful mind. A beautiful mind actually creates value by looking at possibilities and challenges in a world of limitations and problems. We all have limitations and problems in our lives, but if you look at the life of Prophet ﷺ, throughout his 23 years of dawah, he was always looking for possibilities and challenges, whether it was the trip to Taif, whether it was the 3 hijras, whether it was Sulh Hudaybiyah. Wherever he went, he was looking for possibilities and challenges. And actually, if you look at all beautiful minds throughout, from Hazrat Adam alayhi salam to now, they succeeded by looking at possibilities and challenges. But if you look at most of us, we are always cribbing about our limitations and problems. The second definition is that a beautiful mind increases the size of the pie. A parasite or a woodcutter wants to have the pie for him or herself, while a gardener will not only share his pie, but he will learn to increase the size of the pie so everybody can have more of it. The third definition is a beautiful mind makes what seems impossible possible and difficult easy. If you look at some of the greatest people, they will always be finding ways to make what was impossible possible and difficult easy. And actually, Prophet ﷺ did that, and his Sahaba Karam did that. What was impossible, the conquest of Makkah, they made it possible. What was impossible, the humbling of two great empires of that time, they made it possible. And the difficult was actually easy for them. And the last thing is a beautiful mind enables ordinary people to see the big picture to produce extraordinary results. One of the things which I'm humbled by is that when I look at myself, Alhamdulillah, I've got so many resources, it's unbelievable. I have a house, I have a car, I have laptop, desktop, palm top, I have this machine, I can sit here and change my slides. I have these beautiful clothes I can dress up in. And by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are millions of people like myself in the Ummah who are blessed with the same resources. But with all these resources, we are unable to put out the fires in the Ummah. But when I look back 1400 years back, I find that Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba Karam, they didn't have access to the education which I and you have had. Most of them were farmers, shepherds, and traders. They didn't have much resources. Ordinary people. But within a short span of 23 years, they changed the course of history for mankind forever. The question is, how did they do that? And one of my teachers, he suggested that if we could go back in time and if we could ask any one of the Sahaba Karam, who do you work for? The answer would be very simple. They would say, we work for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what do you do? Well, I don't know. I always try and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether I'm a farmer, shepherd, or trader. In my case, if you ask me what do, I will always tell you I work for LAMS, I work for Helping Hands, I'm right now working for AMCC. What do? I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer. I'm always trying to glorify myself. But these Sahaba Karams, they weren't looking for glory for themselves. The only glory they looked for was that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His deen. And each and every one of them, they were very, very humble in saying that all they wanted was to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because of this, they were able to see the big picture of the deen and work to make it happen, and they changed the course of history. So the second thing is, how do you build beautiful minds? Some people are gifted. For example, I, Nasir Aziz, I was born in a Muslim family. I was raised in Islam. I saw my mother praying. I saw my family fasting. I saw Islam being practiced, so I became a Muslim. I became a Muslim by default. Why? Because I firmly believe if I had been born in a Christian family, I would have been a very good Christian. If I had been in a Jewish family, I would have been a very good Jew. If I had been raised in any family, I would have been very good that particular belief system. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Islam to me as a gift. I'm a Muslim by default. Unfortunately, there are millions of people like myself. But then there are some people who have beautiful minds by design. And actually, I never had a good contemporary example till this last summer of 2013 when I was teaching in New York, the same thing to an Islamic school, to their teachers. And there I met this lady, and later on, Brother Athar, who is the coordinator of Helping Hands, he told me her story, and I had tears in my eyes. This lady was a certified chef, and she was making something like $80,000. She was married to a person who was an IT person who was making $100,000, and they had 7 children. So with $180,000, they had the American dream, which is their own car, they could have bought their own house, their own family. But one day, like Newton understood gravity when the apple fell on his head, she understood Islam because Islam fell on her head. And she accepted Islam. And the minute she accepted Islam, she went to her husband and she said, I have accepted Islam, what are your plans? That man was actually very smart. He said, listen, lady, I have nothing to do with this. You do what you want to do. So what she did was she divorced him. So with one stroke of decision, her income fell from 180,000 to 80,000. And then she examined her life according to the teachings of Islam. And she found that there were two things she was doing as part of a profession which were abhorrent to Islam. One, that she was cooking pork and bacon. And the second thing was that the menus she designed had white wine or red wine. So she resigned her job. And with that resignation, her income fell from 80,000 to zero. As soon as the landlord found that she has given up her job and she's divorced, he served her an eviction notice with 7 children. When I met her, this lady was working as a teacher in the Islamic school. Her total sum salary was $18,000. I never had the courage to do what this lady did. That is why I will never ever be able to match her with my words and deeds. She was actually following the sunnah of Sahaba Karam, who gave up their businesses, their families, their lives, everything to follow Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina, and they gave up everything. The greatest people in the world were able to build beautiful minds by design. They actually helped others. And if you read the Quran, they are the Sahaba Karam. They are their followers, the Tabi'in, the Taba Tabi'in, the great sheikhs who travel all over the world to help people in building beautiful minds. Our question was very simple. Can we build beautiful minds by design in the world that we live in today? And if yes, then how do we do it? This is the question which we struggled with. So our strategy was very simple. If you look at this world that we live in, then from our bodies to our houses, to our cars, to our clothes, to our degrees, to this earth, planet Earth, to the sun, the star, the moons, the galaxies, the universe, everything is hardware. And in this world of hardware, software is our ability to think. Now the question was, what is more important? And when we tried to answer this, we went back again 1400 years ago. And we said, one day before the Dawah, just one day before the Dawah, everybody in Mecca was sharing the same hardware. They have almost the same software. But one day after the Dawah, what did Prophet ﷺ ask his companions to do? Did he ask them to change their horses, their houses? No, he asked them to change the software. Islam is all about software. And then we wanted to know why it is so important. And over a period of time, the first 13 years, the software of Islam was ridiculed by the Quraysh because of the strength of their hardware. But on the 8th Hijri, by virtue of the software of Islam, Makkah fell like a ripe apple into the lap of the Muslims, without firing a single arrow, without wielding a single sword. Makkah melted. In the next 30 years, the two greatest empires, they melted in front of the software of Deen. And there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet, they taught us the greatest sunnah of Islam, that with the software of Deen, the hardware of the dunya is matai qalil, insignificant, nothing. But when we look at ourselves, what is actually more important for us? I'm ashamed to tell you that, including myself, most of us, 24/7, what are we running after? From morning to evening, every day, we are running after the hardware of this dunya. Better houses, better cars, better clothes, better things. Very few of us we allocate time to improve the software of the deen in ourselves. So our strategy is very simple. We want to build beautiful minds, and we want to help people in building their beautiful minds. And actually, if you look at this, the way Prophet ﷺ did it, the first 13 years of Mecca, the building of beautiful minds were all about personal excellence. As soon as the Muhajirin came to Medina, he established teamwork through Mawakhat, when he established partnership between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And then before he died, he left a nursery of leaders who changed the course of history over the next 30, 40 years. This, again, is our strategy. We want to help people in achieving personal excellence. We want people to work together, and we want Muslims to assume leadership roles. Now, mind is the software of the brain. With most people, it develops by default. If you look at an average Muslim person or any human being, 10% of the development of mind is because of the genes, 90% is because of the environment we live in. Actually, I got these numbers in Florida when I was with Brother Yusuf last year, a year and a half ago, sorry. And we were in one of the mosques, and we met this Muslim neurologist, and he gave us these numbers. So with respect to him, we have used these numbers throughout our program. What is happening is that our children are becoming more and more intelligent. And genetically, every generation is becoming smarter than the previous generation. The problem is that the environment is becoming more and more corrupt, especially whether it's back home or here. So with that intelligence, the propensity is to become worse. So what do? This is what we struggle with. And we found some people who were able to build beautiful minds by design despite their genes and environment. And here the most beautiful story is the story of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam in the Quran. If you read his story with these set of principles in mind, you will find that genetically he came from people who had been enslaved by the people of Pharaoh. They were not individual slaves, but as a family, as a people, they had been enslaved. So genetically, the genes were those of slave people. On the other hand, the environment in which he was raised was the most corrupt environment in Egypt, the house of Pharaoh. So logically, what you should have seen was a weak person with tremendously corrupt habits. Instead, you see a magnificent prophet, the most mentioned prophet in the Quran. And I asked my teacher, how did it happen? And he gave me a very powerful explanation. He said, wherever you are, wherever you live, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a choice. What we want to choose for ourselves and what we don't want to choose for ourselves. For example, when you go to Walmart or any supermarket to buy things, you choose what you're going to buy. And you choose what you're not going to buy. There are millions of things there, but you choose what you're going to buy. Same thing with Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. As a child, he was exposed to the goodness of Bibi Asiya. And he chose to imbibe that goodness for himself with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as he was growing up, he was exposed to both the kufr of Pharaoh and his leadership. And he chose to imbibe the leadership of Pharaoh. And then when he had to run away to Madian, and he was asked by the Shuaib to take one of his daughter's hand in marriage in return for 8 to 10 years of service, he chose to learn wisdom from Hazrat Shuaib. So whenever you see goodness, leadership and wisdom, you are actually seeing Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. So I asked my teacher, what is there for us? Because he was a prophet, we are not. So he said, Nasir, we are very lucky. For each and every one of us, regardless of where we live, back home or in America, in each of our houses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us two gifts, the Quran and the Sunnah of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for those of us who have held the Quran and Sunnah with both their hands, they will never go astray. And those of us who neglect to hold them, there is no escape. And actually, for most of you who are here, sitting here after Isha, even though you have so many things to do. My dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that each and every one of you and your family members throughout your lives, we hold the Quran and Sunnah with both our hands so that we do not go astray. So what does a beautiful mind look like? A beautiful mind is discerning. It can distinguish between what is right and wrong. Now, this is something which each and every one of us can do. We come to the mosque, we hear the imams, we hear the khatibs, and we have read the Quran, we have read the Sunnah. The problem is in the second point, self-starting. The path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so dry. It is so unbelievably simple that we do not find it attractive. But the path of kufr is so attractive, it's so spicy, that we become self-starting there. And on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is very difficult to get up for Fajr. It is very difficult to do the Isha after I have been well fed by Brother Yusuf. It's very difficult to follow the deen as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do because it's so unattractive. But the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so powerful that each and every one of us, if we decide to follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we take a single step, He engulfs us in His mercy. And then He blesses us with 3 beautiful gifts. The first one is Hubbullah, the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second one is Hubbi Rasulullah sallam, which is love for Rasulullah sallam, and Hubbi Deen, which is love for the deen of Islam. Now, whenever you have these 3 great passions, you become generous and courageous. Now, if you want to understand generosity, think about Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that when Prophet ﷺ wanted people to donate for one of the war efforts of Islam, he brought everything in his house. And when Prophet ﷺ said, Abu Bakr, what have you left for your family? And he said, Wallah, I have left the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet for my family. This was generosity. It could not be possible without Hubbullah, Hubbi Rasul, and Hubbi Deen. And if you want to understand courage, then think about Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. When he accepted Islam, he found that the Muslims were praying in the house of Arqam because they were too scared to pray openly. So he walks up to Hazrat Rasulullah sallam and he says, Ya Rasulullah sallam, tell me, aren't we on the haqq? And Prophet sallam says, Wallah, we are on the haqq. Then he says, why are we praying in hiding? We should be praying in the Kaaba. And next day, there were only 40 Muslims at that time, approximately. They walked in 2 lines. One line was led by Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the second line was led by Sayyidina Amir Hamza radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And when they walked into Kaaba, the chiefs of Quraysh, they were stunned. They never thought the Muslims would have the courage to come and openly pray in the Kaaba. And that day they understood that the genie is out of the bottle. They can't control Islam. And after that, Rasulullah sallam started calling Umar as Farooq, the one who can differentiate between what is right and wrong. So with courage and generosity, you become positive and energetic, you become motivated and self-confident, your communication skills become fasih and baligh. And if you want to understand this, think about the Muslims who migrated to the court of Najashi. And when Najashi said, tell me about your deen, and they recited Surah Maryam with such grace that he had tears in his eyes, and he said, Wallah, this is the true deen. Your values and belief system, you become a team player. You stop thinking about I, and you say we, my family, my mosque, my people, my community, my ummah, my nation. Your values become very strong, and your belief system becomes powerful, and you continuously learn and improve yourself. So, if you look at all this, what is this, hardware or software? This is the software of the deen. And in the time of Prophet ﷺ, anybody who accepted Islam, this was the basic foundation which was provided to each Muslim. On top of that, they built their dunya, whether they were farmers, traders, or shepherds. And because of that, they became the gardeners of Islam. But when this software was not there, and people are like myself, they became MBAs, MDs, lawyers, PhDs. Then instead of becoming gardeners, we became parasites. And all we wanted to use our education was to enrich ourselves rather than doing anything for the ummah. So, what can we do? The first thing is excellence. Now, mediocrity is the path where the environment defines what the man or woman will do. And excellence is the path where the man or woman decides how they will work within an environment to live the way they want to live. In the West, the concept of mediocrity is related to wealth, and the concept of excellence is related to excess wealth. Mediocrity is absence of wealth, and excellence is excess of wealth. So, mediocre people are those who do not have money, which is people like ourselves. But curve of excellence is full of people like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, people who have so much money that they can live they want to live. But Islam was very different. In Islam, the day before they accepted Islam, people were living on the curve of mediocrity. And whenever any person accepted Islam, there was a quantum shift. They moved from mediocrity to excellence. This was equally true for Uthman bin Affan. When he accepted Islam, he moved from mediocrity to excellence. It was equally true for Hazrat Abdul Rahman bin Auf, when he accepted Islam, he moved from mediocrity to excellence. But it was also equally true for Hazrat Bilal, who was a slave, a freed slave. He moved from mediocrity to excellence. It was equally true for Zayd bin Haris. It was equally true for Hazrat Samia, who died. So what did Islam do that every person who accepted Islam would move and make a quantum shift from mediocrity to excellence? The first thing which Islam did was it taught them to develop a vision. Now, if you read the Quran as it came in the first 3 years, it talks about the vision of Islam. Very simple. The first part of the vision is the oneness and supremacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you want to understand this, just read Surah Ikhlas. Kul huwallahu ahad. Say that Allah is one. And the last ayah of the same surah, Walam yakulluhu kufuwan ahad. He is one and supreme. There's nobody like him. So oneness and supremacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first part of the vision. The second part of the vision is the day of the judgment. We all have to be there. And the third part of the vision is that on that day, all decisions will be made according to my actions on this planet Earth. This is the vision of Islam. And every person who accepts Islam has to understand this vision. The second thing which the Prophet ﷺ taught his people was that the focus should be on building a beautiful mind. Do good things. Think good thoughts. The building of beautiful mind is the ultimate goal of a Muslim. And the third thing is empowered learning. How do you build this beautiful mind? You learn from the Quran and the Sunnah. And the fourth thing is, Islam was never about theory. Islam was all about practice. If it had been about theory, then Rasulullah ﷺ would not have forbidden his companions to write his hadith. Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq would have written a book. Umar Farooq would have written a book. Hazrat Usman Ghani would have written a book. Hazrat Ali Karamullah would have written a book. None of them wrote a single sentence. Not a single sentence. They were practitioners of Islam. And this was their goal, to tremendously and continuously improve what they were preaching to others. So these four were the elements which moved ordinary people and extraordinary people from mediocrity to excellence. On the other hand, if you look at the Ummah today, this is the biggest graveyard of talented and God-gifted people who do not understand the vision of Islam. And when you do not understand the vision of Islam, then the focus becomes empire building. How much money I have, how many cars, how many houses, the wealth we have. And then there is a disinterest in learning from the Quran and the Sunnah. You're not bothered. And ultimately it destroys people because there's a continuous deterioration which starts from the qalb, which is dissatisfied, and the mind which cannot think, and the tongue which talks about things they do not understand, and the families, the communities are destroyed. So one of the things we understood is that whenever a single person does well, a family does well, a community does well, a nation or an ummah, then people move from mediocrity to excellence. And whenever a single person is destroyed, or a family is destroyed, or a community is destroyed, or a nation is destroyed, or an ummah is destroyed, people start moving from excellence to mediocrity. And unfortunately, that's what is happening to us as Muslims. And we have to make a focused attempt on moving back from mediocrity to excellence. And Prophet ﷺ taught us that it can be done and we can do it. So how do we do that? Basically, very simple. If you look at our lives, we have many problems. But wherever we are, there are some things which we can control, and there are many things beyond our control. And what Prophet ﷺ taught us was that do what you can do, control what you can control. And Hazrat Ali Karamallah Wajho, he explained this in a very beautiful manner when a Baddu came to him and he said, what is the difference between taqdeer and tadbir? And he said, lift a leg. And he lifted his one leg, and then he said, lift the other leg. He said, I can't do it. He said, exactly this way, the first foot that you move is your tadbir, but the second foot is your taqdeer. And at the end of the day, whenever you take the first step in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the second step to go beyond where you wanted to go and help you in moving forward. If it's in the right direction, He gives you the power to move in the right direction. If it's in the wrong direction, He lets you go in the wrong direction. The choice is ours. So what we have seen is that the best of us, when we focus on the controllables in our lives, we start excelling. And when we start looking at the uncontrollables, which is our risk, which is our taqdeer, then we are demolished. So one of the lessons is don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And the second lesson which Islam teaches us is that as we control and improve our mind, the world around us starts improving. So as you improve yourself by reading the Quran and the Sunnah, you enrich your mind with the learnings from the Quran and Sunnah, the world around you starts improving and things start making sense to you. Actually, this whole exercise of moving from mediocrity to excellence, it helps you in transforming your potential into achievements. So all of us, we have tremendous potential to succeed, which is what we can do. But this world and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they reward us not because of our potential, they actually reward us according to the results, our achievements. Now, try and understand this, that this transformation is what something so powerful that Americans, Canadians, Europeans, Japanese, Chinese, Indians, Brazilians, Russians, they're spending trillions of dollars through their schools, colleges, universities to make this happen. And the world of Islam is sleeping. Our education systems are zillions of miles behind. They are just there to do lip service. The problem is that 1400 years ago, Prophet ﷺ faced a unique problem. So once we understood this, we said, what can we do? I don't have those millions and trillions of dollars to transform the education system, nor do I have the ability to do it. So I asked myself a simple question, what can we do? And then again, I went back 1400 years back, and I found that Prophet ﷺ was faced by a unique problem. He had been ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take the message of Deen to the four corners of the world, and the only resource available to him were his people. So Rasulullah ﷺ started the most unique program in the history of mankind. He started teaching and training his people, and he taught them how to convert their potential into achievements, because he knew intuitively that his biggest asset were the people of Islam, who could take this message, nothing else. So the first thing he taught them was the importance of knowledge. And he emphasized that you have to acquire knowledge, every man, woman, and child has to acquire knowledge from cradle to grave. Now, why was this so tremendous emphasis on knowledge? Very simple. We all have problems. And if you look at your problems, the basic reason we have problems in life is because whenever our knowledge is here and the problem is here, that problem will keep on pestering us till we increase our knowledge to such a level that this knowledge rises above the level of the problem. And once we achieve that, this problem will disappear, melt, disintegrate. And towards this end, he taught us a very simple dua, which consists of basically 3 words. Rabbe zidni ilma. Unfortunately, we memorized this dua and we thought this is for appearing in exams. So every time we had an exam, we would recite this like 100,000 times every day or 1,000 times a day. But as soon as the exams were over, we wrapped it up and we said, okay, now we'll teach our children how to pass the exams. What we never understood was that acquisition of knowledge was a lifelong process. You cannot give it up. So knowledge was the primary lesson which Prophet ﷺ taught his people, that you have to acquire knowledge, every man, woman, and child, from cradle to grave. The second thing he taught his companions was the importance of attitude. If you want to succeed in life, if you want to convert your potential into achievements. And towards this, he showed it by example. For example, the first 13 years in Mecca, the Muslims were a persecuted minority. And here, Prophet ﷺ himself practiced and taught his people that whenever you are faced by persecution, then the order is sabr, shukr, salah, and dua. The 4 elements of fighting persecution: sabr, shukr, salat, and dua. And then when they migrated to Medina, Islam started flowering. And in Medina, you find something beautiful. That the greatest day perhaps in the life of Prophet ﷺ was the conquest of Mecca. And on that day, the first thing which Prophet ﷺ showed us was forgiveness to his worst enemies. And the second element, when he rides into the Kaaba on his camel, rather than being proud as a conqueror, he's bent double. His beard was touching the kajava of his camel. And with his tongue, he was uttering words of hamd, sana, and shukr. So what did he teach people like myself? Something very simple. You will have problems. We all will have problems. And whenever you have a problem, 4 elements: sabr, shukr, salat, and dua. And we will also have good days when our children will smile, when our spouses will laugh, when we will achieve what we wanted to achieve in life. And that day, he says, be humble. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he made it possible. Without him, we are nothing. This was the attitude that he taught us. And the third thing was about skills. Whatever his companions did, his very simple instruction was to do it well. Ahsan. Whatever you do, do it well. And the fourth thing was habits. He himself had beautiful habits, and he encouraged his companions to develop beautiful habits. And his formula was so simple, so powerful, so beautiful. Whatever good habit you want to acquire, start doing it in small doses, but do it regularly. And when you master it, then you bring it to the level you want to do it. So these were the 4 essential ingredients. But then there were these 3 other elements which focus these 4 essential ingredients. The first one we have talked about is the vision. But this vision was driven by the purpose. And he taught his companions that the sole and only purpose of being Muslim is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We live at his pleasure. Our only goal is to please him. And in order to please him, if you read the Quran says, how can you please him? On the day of the judgment, when we stand in front of him, how can we please him? And Quran says that there are many things that you can do, but 4 primary things are that on the day of the judgment, if you come to him with qalb salim, which is a pure and beautiful heart, and if you have done your tawbah. Now, tawbah is so powerful that Prophet ﷺ used to do it 70 times a day. And when Bibi Aisha said, you are a prophet, why do you do it? He said, you want me to not avail the beauty and bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing tawbah? The third thing is, if you have iman. And the fourth thing is, if you have done good deeds. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, if you do all these 4, I'll convert your sayyat into good deeds. I'll give you accounts in your right hand. Your nur will be in front and on the right side, and I'll give you Jannah. After that, Quran says, these good deeds, what are they? And Quran says they are in many ways your goals, but also your means towards the end. And here Quran bifurcates them in 2 major categories. The first and the primary category is Haququllah. Allah's right on each and every one of his Muslim creation. And here, the first right is the right of Salat, namaz. The second is, again, Siyam and Qiyam. And the third is Zakat, if it is liable on you, and Hajj, if you can afford to do it. These are the 4 primary things which Allah requires from you. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is not enough. My other people have rights on you. This is Haququl Ibad. And in Haququl Ibad, the biggest haqq is the haqq of the parents on us. And after that, it is your spouse and children, your neighbors. And then Yatama wal Masakin. Now, 2 years ago, I was doing a fundraiser for Helping Hands for the orphans. And I came across this beautiful hadith whereby Rasulullah ﷺ said that any one of you who takes care of an orphan, I will be like this with him in Jannah. And he raised his 2 fingers and brought them together. When I read this hadith, it took me a long time to understand the significance of this hadith. You all have read the Quran and you have read the hadith. For every good deed, there's Jannah. If I pray 24/7, it's Jannah. If I fast 365 days a year till my last breath, it is Jannah. If I give away everything I have, it is Jannah. But for taking care of an orphan, it is 2 in 1. Jannah with companionship of the Prophet ﷺ like this. This is the most simplest act of kindness. which can take you straight to Jannah with companionship of the Prophet ﷺ. And the year I realized this, I started sponsoring a child. My submission is very simple. Yatama, take care of them. Because I think all these organizations, whether it's Helping Hand, Islamic Relief, they offer a program on $1 a day. $1 is an amount which if it drops from my pocket, I wouldn't even miss it. So make sure you encourage, you do it for yourself, do it for your spouse, do it for your children, and see how everything in your life will change. I've seen it changing in my life. I strongly encourage you to do it and see the fruits of taking care of an orphan and how it will bring you peace, prosperity, kindness and generosity in your life. So Yatama wal Masakin, the travelers, the needy, and then anybody in the Ummah and outside the Ummah, you have to take care of them. Now how do you do it? For that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the 3 passions of Hubbullah, Hubbi Rasul and Hubbi Deen. So the vision, goals and the passion is to focus your knowledge, attitude, skills and habits to you become a better Muslim. But then, for a beautiful mind, there are 2 extras. The first one is, self-belief. In the West, the self-belief is about self-confidence. But in Islam, the concept of self-belief is very different. It actually comes from 3 elements which Rasulullah ﷺ taught his companions. In Islam, self-confidence or self-belief comes from proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Prophet ﷺ taught his companions that this proximity comes from 3 elements. The first element is Iman. It's very simple. You do the kalma and you have Iman. But the second element is Yaqeen. Now Yaqeen is slightly harder. And if you read the Akhri ayah of Surah Baqarah, you find Yaqeen is there when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to believe in Him without seeing Him. The angels, the prophets, the books, the day of the judgment. That is Yaqeen of the Deen. And Yaqeen of the Dunya is that every single thing which I have, from my longest hair to my toenail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala personally selected it for me. Every atom, every subatomic particle in my body, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala personally selected it for me. And I have to be grateful for it. And nobody can take it away from me as long as He wants me to have it. Not only my body, but my clothes, my laptop, my car, my spouse, my children, my wealth, every single thing that I own in this world was personally selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I should have it, and I'll have it as long as He wants me to have it. The second part of the Yaqeen of Dunya is that everything I wish I want to have, I cannot have it till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to have it. So once you have this Yaqeen of the Dunya, then you will never ever be jealous of what you don't have. You will never worry about what you don't have. The last element is perhaps the most powerful. And I think this is the ultimate gift which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives His people, and that is taqwa. Taqwa is a very powerful word. It's a big word. It's a huge word. And scholars have spent lifetimes explaining it to themselves and to people around them. My explanation of taqwa is very humble, and actually it's very superficial. I understood taqwa from one simple ayah of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they ask you where I am. And then He answers that I am closer to them than their jugular vein. Now, we all have read this ayah hundreds of times. And one day, I was hugging my eldest son, Khalid, and it was a very tight hug. I haven't seen him for a while. And that day I told myself how close I am to my son. And then I realized that on that instant, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was even closer to me than my son was. How? My son was just feeling my love and warmth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what was in my head, what was in my heart, what was in my body, what was in my soul. And same thing with Khalid. So, the thing about taqwa is that regardless of where we are, we cannot hide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can hide from you, go to the toilet or some corner of this mosque, but I cannot hide from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now connect the dots. I cannot hide anything from Him. And the biggest purpose in my life is to please Him. So how should I live my life? And He's my master. And I'm His abd, I'm His slave. How should I live my life? And if you connect the dots, then it's very simple. Every single thing that I do should have the niyyah to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once these dots are connected, this is taqwa. So I stand in front of you. I am trying to share this with you. Why? Because I want to please Him. I will go back to my spouse and children and I will love them. Why? Because I want to please Him. I make a living for myself because it pleases Him that I should earn halal and tayyib and khair and barakah rizq for my children and myself. So whatever you do, when you do it to please Him, that's it. That's taqwa. Now this is the taqwa of ordinary days. What about taqwa and duress? When everything falls apart. When you are shaken to your core and you say, Wallah, where's Allah? And for that I'll share with you two ayahs. The first incident in the Quran, and I'm sure there are many, but these are the two which I remember, is when Hazrat Musa is leading his people away from the people of Pharaoh. And in front there's a water body. And when they look back, it's the army of the Pharaoh. And the people of Hazrat Musa tell him, Musa, you have destroyed us. We cannot escape. And what does Hazrat Musa say? What he said is nothing but taqwa. Inna ma'iya rabbi sayahdeen. My Rabb is with me and He will guide me. He will show me a way. This was taqwa under duress. The second incident is about the hijrah of Prophet ﷺ when they're hiding in the cave of Sor, and the kuffar, they ride right up to the face of the cave. And Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq is trembling like this. And he says, Prophet ﷺ, we are doomed. And the Prophet ﷺ says, La tahzan, inna Allaha ma'ana. What are you scared of? Why are you worried? He is with us. These two incidences are quoted in the Quran about taqwa under duress. Now, I feel that when the taqwa is not there, every single thing goes away. But with taqwa, everything is possible. And the last thing is learning. Learning gives us humility. Every time we know, I feel that I know a lot, it is just a drop in the ocean. And I keep on learning because that's the sunnah of Prophet ﷺ. So how do you start? Where do you start? This is what Prophet ﷺ taught his companions. This is how they transformed their potential into achievements. This is how they changed their lives. Actually, after many months of thinking, searching, we came back to where Islam started. Ikra bi ismi rabbik. Read, learn with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything in this world starts with Ikra bi ismi rabbik. And once you understand this, then you start asking yourself, how did Rasulullah sallam teach the Muslims to learn? They all started with literacy. Everybody who accepted Islam would be asked to learn, to read and write. And then the second step was to acquire knowledge from the Quran and the Sunnah. And the third step was that learning was never enough. You have to practice it. You have to use it as a skill in a daily life. Speaking the truth was not an academic concept. It was something which everybody was practicing. Honesty and integrity were not an exercise of intellectual. It was something which was being practiced. Caring for others was not something which was written in the Quran. It was a practice of every Muslim. So the skill was in practicing what they learned from Prophet ﷺ and the Quran into their daily lives. And the last thing, that with the best of the prophets, with the best of the greatest teachers in the world, it took his companions 23 years to understand Islam. For us, it's a lifetime process. None of us can say, I know enough. We have to keep on doing it till our last breath. Now, what happens to people who can learn to convert their potential into achievements? Actually, they learn to change their destiny. This is one of the greatest gifts which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every Muslim. We can change our destiny on this planet Earth. If you look at our brains and minds, they cannot operate in a vacuum. They need an environment. And Islam emphasizes 5 elements in the environment. The first one is religion. This is so powerful. The first day we are born, we are totally helpless. And in our country, Pakistan, you go and do adhan in the right ear and akama in the left. That's the first day. And the last day, when you are totally helpless, you are dead. You can't even lift a fly from your face. Islam says, give them, bathe them, according to the Sunnah, cover them with 2 pieces of cloth and bury them as Prophet ﷺ has taught you. And in between, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is my path. If you follow it, I'll reward you. But if you choose to do anything otherwise, I'll destroy you, not only in this world, but in the hereafter. And this is exactly what's happening to us. The second is the family. And in the family, the role of the mother is so powerful, it's unbelievable. Look at the mother of Hazrat Maryam. When Hazrat Maryam is in her womb, this woman is praying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I will give this child in your path, in your name, in your cause. What a lovely dua to make. I have 2 sons. We had made many duas for them. We made dua for wealth, for happiness, for long life. Not once did we say, me and my wife, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give these children in your name, in your path, in your cause. Look at what happens to Hazrat Maryam. Look at what happens to her son, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, because of the dua. And when this dua is not made, then look at the Nuh's son. When he's drowning, and Hazrat Nuh, a prophet, is praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, save him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's not one of us. That is my biggest fear. That me and my wife, we never prayed for our children. And may Allah forgive me if they're ever in trouble and I ask for them to be saved. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's not one of us, where will I go? So even though that your sons are big people like myself, like my sons, make dua for your children, that may Allah accept them in His name, in His path, in His cause. And may Allah give every mother the courage to make this dua for her children. Friends are people whom we care for as we grow up in our schools, colleges, universities, and workplaces. Actually, they are very powerful. In many ways, we become like our friends. And one of the things which our teachers teach us is that on the day of the judgment, we'll be raised with our friends and we'll be judged with our friends. And most of my teachers, they encourage me to have friends who are better than me in the deen. Why? Because they will facilitate higher grades of Jannah if I'm with them. Culture is something which Prophet ﷺ designed. He took the best from the Arab culture, the courage, the generosity, the chivalry, the bravery, the caring, and he destroyed and demolished what was not according to Islam, like burying of young girls, marrying your dead father's beautiful widows, all these stupid things. He said, this is not us. And then he established a sunnah that wherever you are, you can pick up the best things from where you come from. You can pick up the best things where you are, and you can actually design a culture for yourself from whatever is consistent in Islam. And the last thing is the organization we work for. We all want to make a lot of money. And we all want to work for the highest bidder, which is very nice. But if you look at Islam, then when you work for the highest bidder, people who give you the most dollars, then they also want you to do something else. They want their pound of flesh. Many times we cannot do what Islam wants us to do in terms of our ibadah and caring of our families. So Islam, in its own wisdom, says that the deen is not part of the dunya. The dunya is a subset of the deen. The job is a subset of the deen. The organization you work for is a subset of the deen. So work for the organization which allows you to do your ibadah and take care of your family. So go to the highest bidder who will let you take care of your deen and take care of your family. Now, all these 5 elements, they give input to the brain and mind. And over a period of time, the output is judged on 3 levels: feelings, dreams, ideas, and thoughts. So a one-day child can only feel hot, cold, hungry. After a while, this child learns to distinguish between the face of the father and the mother and the elder siblings. And then after a few weeks or months, the child will learn how to think. Then when I raise my hands like this, somebody picks me up. When I smile, they hug me. When I say "gung gung," they will talk to me in my language, as silly as I am. So this triangle stays with us throughout our lives. For example, for the first 50 years of my life, I was a woodcutter. So all my feelings were about making money, wealth, success, hubbeja, to be respected. All my dreams 24/7 was again the same thing. All my thoughts and ideas were the same. And because of this, every word that I uttered was about making money, becoming famous. My actions were my habits, and my character was fast becoming that of Qarun, and my destiny was a one-way ticket to hell. And then I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was kind to me, and He put it in my heart that I should read the Quran and I should try and understand what the Quran is saying to me. And when I found that whatever Allah wants from me is totally, absolutely different from what I was doing, I was stunned. I was 50-year-old, and I said, what have I done with my life? And then I asked myself, what can I do? And the biggest thing that you can do if you want to change yourself is to give. Quran is full of ayahs that talk about giving to the poor, the needy, the parents, the siblings, people you care for. And once I started giving, I started understanding that giving is all about being a gardener of Islam. So the feelings, the dreams, and the ideas and thoughts, they started changing. And once this core base changed, the words that I utter started changing, my actions, my habits, my character started changing, and I could feel that my destiny was changing. This was the output that I was giving to the world. The world around me weighs it with and gives me feedback. And sometimes the feedback is very cruel. It says, Nasir, you are a first-class idiot and stupid fool. You are talking about being a gardener in a world that is dominated by parasites and woodcutters. They will not only destroy you, but they will also destroy the 60 million gardeners that you want to help generate. So the question is, what can we do? So again, we went back 1400 years and we said, what happened to Prophet ﷺ on the first day of the dawah when he was descending from the cave And he had not reached his house yet. He was trembling like this. He didn't understand what had happened. He was scared. But throughout the next 23 years, he never gave up. He used two very powerful tools to stay steadfast in the message of Islam. The first one was his belief system. His belief, very strong, very powerful in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second one was his ma'amalat, his interaction with people, which throughout his life was based on values. Now, this belief system was, you had the Quraysh of Makkah who were basing their belief system on wealth and numbers. And they thought they were strong. But actually they were very weak compared to the belief system of Rasulullah sallam, which was based on proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on iman, yaqeen and taqwa. And over the next 23 years, his belief system was so strong that it helped his companions destroy not only the faith of the people of Makkah, but also the two greatest empires of the world. When it came to values, he taught his companions that the reverse values are those values which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden his people. And Quran is full of stories about ummahs who defied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with reverse values, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them, each and every one of them. And then Quran encourages us with forward values, the values that take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Honesty, integrity, truthfulness. And we all know the difference between the forward and reverse values, so what's the problem? The problem is very powerful, that these forward values, we all say that we are honest, we all say we have integrity, we all say we are truthful. But when we work with others, people find that our stated values are very different from our lived values. And I'll give you an example. About 15 years back, we did not have these cell phones in Pakistan, and we used to have landlines. And Khalid and Asim, my two children, were about 5 and 7. And often whenever somebody called, they would run to pick up the phone and say, "Assalamu alaikum, I am Khalid," or "I am Asim." And somebody on the other side would say, "I'm Uncle so-and-so, I want to talk to your father." And they would run to me and say, "Abbu, Uncle so-and-so is calling you on the phone." Sometimes I would not want to talk to Uncle so-and-so for some of my personal reasons. So what would I tell Khalid or Asim? I tell him I'm not at home. And this child of mine would go on the phone and say, "Abbu is saying that he's not at home." Okay, and the key was that throughout my life, I told my children to be honest because I was honest. And what they were learning was the definition of honesty from my father. Why? Regardless of what you do, you tell your children 1,000 times to be honest. They will adopt the definition of honesty which they will hear from your lips or from your actions. They won't listen to what you tell them. So my children developed a definition of honesty that it's all right to be honest when there's no problem. But whenever there's a problem, what you can do, you can just twist the truth a little bit and still claim that, "Wallah, I am honest." Now, what happens to a person who says something and does something else? How are these people defined in the Quran? People like myself who were telling their children that you're honest and then also showing them how to lie. These people are called munafiqeen. And for them are the lowest levels of hell. And I could never understand why somebody who's telling such a small lie will go to the lowest levels of hell. And let me tell you why. When the risk is small, the level of lying is very small. As this child grows up, and when the risk becomes greater, guess what happens to his capacity to lie? It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, till they become the presidents of Egypt, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. And then what happens? They kill their own people and they tell others, I'm doing that to protect Islam. I'm doing it to protect my own people. They become munafiqeen of the greatest order. But guess where they started learning this? From their parents in the house. And now what you see is a vicious cycle of munafiqat in the Islamic world. The people are munafiqeen to the government is munafiq to the people. So how did Prophet ﷺ deal with it? In the 13 years of Medina, there was no munafiqat. Islam was pure, pristine. Rasulullah ﷺ faced munafiqat in Medina. So he used 4 things to fight munafiqat. The first 2 were Sadiq and Amin, which he was throughout his life. The power of Sadiq Amin is so much, you can either be Sadiq or Amin, or you can be a munafiq. You cannot be a Sadiq and Amin in the morning and munafiq in the evening. You cannot be Sadiq and Amin to your wife and family and munafiq to the community. You are either Sadiq or Amin, or you are munafiq. And if you are Sadiq and Amin, then you will never ever be a munafiq. So that is the first 2 things that he established throughout his life, that he will never ever be anything short of Sadiq and Amin. Why? When you are Sadiq and Amin, you build something called trust. And this is why even his greatest enemies trusted him. They never dared to call him anything but Sadiq and Amin. The third thing which he did to fight munafiqat was he would give back more than what he got. And the greatest story is that of Zaid bin Haris. He was his slave. And the Prophet ﷺ used to take care of him, play with him, laugh with him, care for him so much that when his parents came to get him, Zaid bin Haris refused to go. That was only possible if Prophet ﷺ was giving back to Zaid bin Haris more than what he could get even from his own parents. And the last thing is something which was very powerful for me. All my life, I have seen these homeless people, whether you see them in your city, or you go to Chicago, where I'm coming from, or Houston, where I have lived, New York. And these homeless people are people who have nowhere to go. And they have nowhere to go because they have no credit cards, no banks, no car, no houses, no nothing. And many of them, they have been thrown, their parents have thrown them out. Some of them have been thrown out by their spouses. And some of them have been thrown out by their children for one single reason, that they were poor. They have nothing. So when you are poor, even your closest friends and relatives will throw you out. The society will throw you out. So my question was very simple. When you read the seerah of Prophet ﷺ, the first day when he's born, there's nothing in the house of Bibi Amna to celebrate his birth. All the wealth that was left by Abdullah was a few horses, camels, goats, and sheep, and they had been consumed between his death and the birth of Prophet ﷺ. So there was nothing in his house to celebrate the birth of Prophet ﷺ. The few days before he passed away, if you read the seerah, one night he asked Bibi Aisha, what is there in the house? And she said, we have a few coins. So he tells Bibi Aisha, can you just give them away? I do not want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything in my house. And there's a tradition that says on the last night of Prophet ﷺ, there was no oil in the lamp in the house of Prophet ﷺ. And throughout the night, Bibi Aisha tended to him in total, absolute darkness. He was running high fever, he was in pain. And she catered to him in total, absolute darkness. And my question was very simple, that he chose poverty over wealth. He gave away everything he had throughout his life. Why did his people not throw him away? Why was he not made a homeless? But rather than being a homeless, they loved him so much that on the day of Sulh Hudaybiyah, One of the chiefs of Quraysh who came to persuade Prophet ﷺ to go back, he went back and reported to the Quraysh, do not tangle with Prophet ﷺ, because his companions love him so much that they even don't let the water of his wudu fall to the ground. They take it in their hands and rub it on their faces and chest for barakah. Same thing was reported on Hajj al-Wada. So why did people love him so much rather than throwing him out? And I found an answer when I was having a conversation with Dr. Talat Sultan, who was head of Islamic Renaissance in Al-Qura University. And in a conversation, he said something which I've never forgotten, which has changed my life. He said, Nasir, throughout his life, if you read any book of Seerah, not once does Prophet ﷺ criticize any of his companions by name. You don't even hear about him criticizing any of his companions by name. If he had to criticize anybody, he would say, Wallah, I love you, but what you are doing is not right in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet, so if you do it in such and such way. So he would separate the man from the action, he would love the person and ask them to improve what they were doing. That was his criticism. But when he loved somebody, and that somebody was Abu Bakr, he would call him publicly, my Siddiq. And he wanted to praise Umar. He said, you are Farooq. And when he wanted to praise Usman, he said, you are Ghani. And when he wanted to praise Ali, he said, you are Abu Turab. And his only enemy who defeated him in war, he said, you are Saifullah, Khalid bin Walid. Now what was the Prophet ﷺ doing? He taught us something which we have forgotten. That if you want to build people, if you want to build society, you look for good in people. You look for goodness in your companions. And that is what he did throughout his life. He told them what is good in them, what their strength was. These people built their strengths, they joined it together, and they formed the invincible community of Medina. Why is it important for us? I don't know about you, but throughout my life, I remember after the first 3 years, my parents were worried that I would go wrong. And in their love for me, they started telling me what I was doing wrong in life, what was wrong with me, and what not I had done. When I went to school, the only job of my teacher was to criticize me, that my A's were not right, my one was not right, my alif was not right, my Urdu was not right, my English, my maths. And when I started working after 20 years of schooling, my boss was paid to tell me what I was doing wrong. And at the age of 50, my biggest thing, the only thing I knew about myself was what I could not do and what was wrong with me. And my biggest strength was that I can sit in any company and tell others what was wrong with them and what they hadn't done. And after half an hour of such a sitting, guess what would happen? We would fight. And that is what you see in the Ummah. Everybody is telling everybody else what he is not doing, what is their weakness, we fight with each other. And often it ends up cutting throats, which you see in Pakistan, you see in Bangladesh, you see in Iran, you see in Syria, you see in Iraq. We are experts at telling people what, and our own brothers and sisters, what is wrong with them and what they're not doing. So the idea is very simple. You look for goodness in others, and actually that's what we did. Once I understood this principle, I asked myself, what can I do? And the only thing I understood was Allah has given me a gift that I can teach from the heart. And when I came to America, I wanted to share this. And then I prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and found helping hands. Their strength was they could take me to community like yours. We joined hands like this to share this with you. The idea is very simple. The intention is benevolence, to share, to give, to care. And the dua is very simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us only that rizq which has khair and barakah in it, which is halal and tayyib. Help us meet only those people whom you care for, and help us become like them. actually this ayah, Surah Baqarah 177, it took me about an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours to share with you. But this one ayah is so eloquent that it shares with you everything which was in this program. And then there's this beautiful ayah, and that man can have nothing but what he strives for, good or bad. So in the end, all I can say is that at some point you will have to choose how you want to live your life. If you live it like a parasite or a woodcutter, you will have what a parasite or a woodcutter will get. And if you live your life like a gardener, your destiny will be totally different. And then there's this other ayah which says Allah will not change what is in any nation until they all collectively make a change in themselves. And here all I can say is that at the end of the day, I cannot change the ummah. I can change just one person, and that's me. And that's all I'm asking you to think about yourself. Why? Because on the day of the judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask each and every one of us a very simple question. When my ummah was on fire, who were you with? The parasites who were putting the fires, or the gardeners who were putting them out, or people who were just watching and saying we are helpless? So often this is the end, but today we have a choice. It can be a new beginning for all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for sitting here. I know it's very late. Make dua for us, and please make dua for your families. May Allah bless them, your spouses, your children, your parents, your siblings, and for the whole ummah, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the grace to become better.